It's not exact. And g'day, welcome to an interview with. I'm David Applegate, author of the book The Boy of Cade, book 1 of The Empire of Elves. Today with me is Carpenter Gibson, author of The Pink Apocalypse. Oops. No, it's just Pink Apocalypse. Sorry about that, Carpenter. Okay, well, anyway, introduce yourself.
All right. Well, I am Carpenter Gibson. I am starting my author journey way too late in life. We'll get back to that probably. But yeah, currently I have my first book out, Pink Apocalypse, which is well, we can get into the details later. But it's supposed to be hopefully a series where each of the names is something apocalypse based on one of the 4 main characters. So Pink is the first one, because that's her code name, and also it's a long story, but yeah, well, hopefully we'll get to that. But that was the one's like, let's start with her. I'll go with that. Yeah, that's me. I'm 50 years old. I actually do phone customer service for a living. I have in the past done streaming and podcasting a teeny bit here and there. But mostly I'm just trying to kind of reinvent the creative side of my life, and got my first book out during the unfortunate events of recent years. We'll just leave it at that. But the book is not in any way inspired by that. It has no connection. It was just when I ended up with extra time at home, put it that way.
Yeah, so anyhow, when did you realize you wanted to be a writer? Because, I'm actually older than you.
Oh man. Here's the thing, and this is related to any advice I would ever give to anyone else who wants to write. Do it now. Start now. I don't care if you think you're going to suck. Do it now. Start now, because I've been wanting to write in some fashion since I was a kid and teenager. I thought, yeah, I can do this. And of course, back then, my biggest obstacle, hypothetically, was that typewriters are a pain in the neck, and computers had come out, but they were so ridiculously expensive. Even the most basic things, like when I was in junior high, or I don't know what you would call it, but basically, not quite the end of schooling, I got some chance to use like an Apple IIc and things like that. And I thought to myself, okay, this is the way to write stuff. I need a computer. Unfortunately, I grew up in not a poor household, but we couldn't afford one of those. So eventually, by the time I went with my wife to where she went to college, we got a computer mostly for her so she could do her classwork. And then life just got into other things. I had other hobbies, other things to do, and then sometime around the last couple of years, I went, you know what? Let's just start doing it and see where it goes. Because I mean, I should have, and this is like in hindsight, like I said, I should have started, even if the stories were going to be terrible, 30 years ago. There was no real good reason not to, but I didn't. So here we are,
I started with Write-On before Amazon took it down, and then I went to Wattpad, and I had so many people DMing me and saying, "Oh, this is a good story, but," and they never go into the but I think they were just being too polite and saying, but it's too naughty, which is weird. But enough about me. I mean, I started late too, and I got it out in 2016. Then took me 3 years to get the sequel out. I had a bit of drama with my publisher because I made the mistake of doing vanity publishing, and then I wasn't getting any royalties, and so I took it down and re-edited and restarted, and I still get harassed by vanity publishers. Never get it. No, I recommend to nobody use them.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything good about any of them. I just self-publish using KDP at the moment. Although,
yeah, I recommend anybody who can't get a publisher or an agent to just self-publish.
yeah,
And I think most people have to accept the fact they're not going to sell more than 2,000 books in their lifetime. It's just, well, even when what's the name, J.K. Rowling put out her book, there was already over 1 million published authors, and
yeah, and well, and the other thing is, I think the expectations.
There is an audience expectation that every book is going to be perfect.
Yeah, well, I think the other thing is like I have one of my sort of guilty pleasures for reading are Japanese light novels. I read a lot of them because they're very.
I read Overlord recently.
Huh?
I read Overlord recently.
Yeah, it's not bad. The latter ones are. It's like because sometimes they run on too long. Like they, and I don't blame the authors if the books keep selling.
Yeah, like Toradora. I couldn't believe it. 30 million copies for just a slice of life about two high school kids, a brother and sister who are a little too close, but not too close.
Yeah,
we're not talking the Lannisters
here,
but but it sort of drifts close to that, and people are always wondering, but it's more a comedy and more about their internal struggles, and it really comes off as not that exciting, yet it's so popular.
Yeah.
So you never know what's going to be popular. And you really don't.
And some things just hit right. Like, I imagine somebody, I don't know how, must have looked at like, God, what's her name? There's a lot of the was it Anita Blake? I've tried reading a few of those, and I'm not trying to diss it, but it's not for everyone. And I've heard many people who are supposedly literary critics just trash it, but I was like, yes, but that lady's checks cash. Yeah, it's kind of that thing where there's an audience for something for some stuff for everyone. So you never know. You might just hit the right audience, and I mean, 50 Shades of Grey sold 100 million copies, and yet if you run it through a spell checker or a grammar checker, you go, oh my God, how did this get past? This was a publisher, but it's published as it was originally written. It was never that they didn't edit it on purpose. It was just published as written. So you never know what's going to be popular. You exactly.
Really don't.
Yeah, you never know. And I know some people that I've talked to some indie authors that get their best sales by going to conventions, and they'll have a table and then sell their books there. And I think I was like, that seems kind of weird, but then again, with the online experience, ebooks and all that, you're like, yeah, I can kind of see it. And people go to conventions to spend money to some extent, so maybe they've got a point. I don't know. I haven't tried that yet. But
it's also a big capital investment, and it takes a few because people don't, it takes a few. You've got to have the right convention.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
The right public image, and you've got to have a couple of boxes of your books. You've got to be willing to travel around. So, yeah, it's not easy to get into when you've got a budget of $5 like me,
Yeah. But I mean, well, I will say that and on that note, I can praise a couple of things. Like, I'm too cheap to buy Microsoft Office products. I use, it suddenly escapes my brain, but I use Office. And that's free. It's not flawless. Yep. I have had some problems. My biggest issue with it, and I actually even on my Twitter got into a discussion with the developers of it, that it has this tendency, if you use a foreign word, it suddenly turns off the spell check because it thinks you're trying to mix languages. No idea why. So you have to go back in and manually turn it back on. It's like, I know this word is wrong. That's okay. It's German. It's fine. Like, I don't care. Spell check everything else. Or even tell me it's wrong. Just let me leave it there.
I hate telling people the grammar tools I use because they say your grammar sucks. But I say, well, I have a language disability. I forget what they call it, but it's where you muddle up words and you're slow to learn and all these difficulties, and people don't take that into account. They expect perfection, so I've got to deal with that.
Oh yeah, and I like the one review I have on Amazon for Pink Apocalypse specifically cites that my editor was terrible, and I can't deny I had to try and go back and proofread some stuff after it had gone through my proofreader. As far as editing goes, that was mostly me. I couldn't afford a professional editor. I don't have that kind of money.
No.
I just work with what I can, and it's and I guess that's another thing about the book itself. It's not. I'm not trying for high art. On the contrary, it's supposed to be essentially not pulp, because people describe some people take pulp way too seriously as a very specific genre. Certain YouTubers who will not be named are amongst those, but it's kind of in that sense of it's more about action than an adventure than it is character development. There's not like there's no character development, but it's basically it's an adventure.
I hate when people complain about character development and then they watch Black Panther. I mean, really, what character development?
well, I think the thing is that you have to have certain expectations for certain genres. Action and adventure movies are not really the place for deep character development. They can be, to be fair, they can be, and you can explore characters. Like conversely to Black Panther, then you have Winter Soldier, which is fantastic, but it's still just an action movie. I mean, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that,
I don't expect people to get every genre.
Yeah,
I just think that somebody saying that I wrote my book in crayon was just deliberate malice.
That's just kind of mean, yeah.
And Amazon won't take it down, and a lot of people just won't read my book because it's just so frustrating when you see so much garbage out there these days. No offense, but there's a lot of what they call, there's a deliberate, however, fandom of 1-star books, as they call them.
Yeah,
there's an entire website dedicated to what they call the trash novels. Most of them are romance, Oh
yeah, and some of them are awful, and there are people that are big fans of it. Like I said, my guilty pleasure is Japanese light novels, primarily isekai, and half of that stuff is awful. But it's so straightforward and so simple that it's relaxing to read.
Yeah, I think maybe that was the same with Harry Potter. I think that maybe if I re-edited and took a lot of stuff out, that it'd probably sell better. But then it won't be my work. It'll be, and it won't have the story I'm telling,
Yeah.
And it won't. And I think you'd feel the same too about yours. If you had to go back and edit it, it wouldn't be your story anymore.
Well, I've edited. It depends on how much you're editing. Like I remember some people often will re-quote like Stephen King's advice about writing, and he's got a lot of it. But one of the things he said was like, once you've done writing your book, take out 20% of it. And I'm like, you, sir, are a self-confessed sufferer of diarrhea of the keyboard. He said that in a book once. Said, you should take 20% out of every book. I, on the other hand, had to add 2 chapters, not because of the initial story. Once I got it done, it felt there was 2 things that seemed to be missing. There was basically, I had a rhythm to it where the primary plot line that we're seeing is in the here and now, and there's some the chapters alternate to the recent past. It isn't very far back, but it kind of, and that alternating back and forth lets me go essentially do that thing they do in TV where they'll not cut to another scene, but not like all the time, because some TV shows have gotten way too happy about with this. But you have a tense moment or a good dramatic pause, and you go off to something else for a minute because it's
called the emotional wave
with other characters, but this is all from her point of like was the imperfect third person. So it's basically whatever's happening is happening around her, even if it's not from her first person point of view.
Yeah, it's called the emotional wave or the 8-beat arc. It's very popular for TV writing. You'll see it in Game of Thrones, in the way the chapters are written. Everything's short, but soundbite. I think I'd rather you tell me about Pink Apocalypse. Because,
sure.
That's what we're here for. But
that's true. Yeah,
writing perspective. from a writing perspective, I think too many books are the same these days.
Yeah.
They're all written for TV shows, they're all written like they're a TV show, and especially Isekai, they're just a script. There's nothing. There's no action in some of them. They're literally just a script. They're just all words. You have no idea who or some of the characters, their motives, or anything. It's just a script.
Yeah.
No thought, nothing. Not even action half the time.
Yeah, and there's a formula to like I remember going to a conference about whether a convention where they were talking about writing styles, and we're talking about pulp and romance. So there's literally a formula for pulp and literally a formula for romance. The one for pulp is really fucking simple. Excuse my language, sorry.
Yeah.
It's basically man gets into trouble, double down again, and then he resolves it with some resourcefulness or might or just perseverance at the end, and that's it. That's just trouble, more trouble, doubling said trouble, get him out of it.
Yeah,
that's it. And there's nothing wrong with that. But as opposed to a script where you're literally trying to follow a specific formula where everything ends up the same, that's silly.
Like I got told that I had to have my character get into the worst situations possible and make the worst decisions to be relatable. And I'm saying, if he does that, how will he be leader of and hold together a multi-stellar empire and a massive business empire and family and constantly be aware of his political enemies? I mean, that's what I don't like about the drama.
Mm-hmm.
Drama is always making the worst decisions possible and somehow surviving, where we all know basically most dramas should end with he got killed.
There are some authors, and I can name a couple names if we like, but who have this. They basically So the reference that I'm doing here is, if you remember the old animated Aladdin, they had apparently they had in the scripting room, the storyboarding room, when in doubt, hurt the bird. Basically, if they run out of things to think of, have something happen to the parrot, because it was funny. And I think there are some authors who, when drama is required, characters suddenly get dumb. And there's been a couple where I just couldn't even relate because the character is so dumb, and that's the only the plot moves forward because the character does something stupid. It's not because they failed, like they were trying to do the right thing, or they were some understandable mistake. They're just really dumb. And especially
for Aladdin to happen, two things had to happen. One, the king had to have a dumb daughter who would go for the first shirtless guy who came over her balcony, and two, the guy who came over her balcony had a flying carpet. If he was if he climbed up onto the wall, that wouldn't have worked.
Yeah, because and that's one of those where it's magic and a sense of adventure in this world where magic is fairly rare. I can kind of understand it, and again, it's a fairy tale. It's fine in genre, but there's some and the one I'm just going to I'll go ahead and throw this out here. Robin Hobb. A lot of people really like her work, and I tried reading the first two books, and eventually I just got tired because the main character's only defining trait was being a moron, and yet people kept entrusting him with stuff to do, and all of the stuff that would be interesting about a book about an assassin's apprentice was the distinct lack of murder. I'm just saying.
I think that fell off the Assassin's Creed bandwagon.
Man, I don't know how old that book is.
All of a sudden, assassin books were doing really well.
Yeah.
But the problem is also and I'm told this, that you got to put free stuff out there, and I don't know if it's true or not, but so many people expect free stuff, and I don't know.
Yeah, I have a related short story that's available on Wattpad for free. Doesn't involve actually any of the characters that are in the book, but they're in the same organization. So I was like, oh, just throwing it out there as an experiment. And like one of the projects I'm working right now, like the original, like the first draft of the first half of it is available on there too. But it's like, yeah, have a look, you know.
Yeah. So tell me about Pink Apocalypse.
Sure. Well, basically, this started after a really enjoyable playthrough of Wasteland 2. As you can imagine, and when you're writing a post-apocalypse thing, this is a genre that I'm really, really fond of. Fallout, Wasteland, and so some of the other books in that genre. There's lots of things. It's one of those, and also, of course, I lived in the United States during the tail end of the Cold War, and so a lot of the things that Fallout and Wasteland are kind of, well, Fallout in particular makes fun of, are extra funny to me because I at least lived through part of that era. I'm not that old, but pretty close. Like, and it was one of those that still resonated because we still talked about those things, and the grown-ups around me still talked about those things. And so all of that, after playing through Wasteland, I had a good time. I thought, I had some ideas, some like story beats in my head from the little character squad that I'd made, because I just originally put them together. It's like, okay, these would be fun. And then the lockdown started, and I'm like, well, I've got a lot of time at home. Let's write about something. And I just went back to that playthrough that I was just completed with. I was like, let's do that. And then the other thing that inspired it is that most post-apocalypse stuff in the United States that's written by Americans is set in either the West Coast or the East Coast. Although technically Fallout kind of comes into part of the Southwest with the Nevada and all of that. But so Pink Apocalypse is set 200 years after essentially the end of normal civilization, which is somewhere after 2077 in an alternate universe. Like the first divergence that comes up, it's kind of hinted at on the cover where you look at the little flag that she's wearing. It's not the usual American flag. Basically, in the back history of this, Benedict Arnold and the guy whose name I suddenly can't remember, his commander, did not fail, because it's a really great story if you ever hear about this. Benedict Arnold's great failure, supposedly. Well, he was kind of a schmuck, but aside from that, I mean, before he was a traitor, before that though, he was kind of almost as good as he thinks he is kind of guy. But his commander, they were sent to capture whatever effectively the capital was of the Canadian province at the time. The Canadian provinces. Basically, if they'd have taken this city, they'd effectively cut off Canada. And Benedict Arnold's commanders, literally one of those things that only should have happened in movies, got his head taken off by a cannon. Fucking amazing. Whoa. Yeah. But in this universe, they succeeded. And that's basically the point of Divergence, where things are different. And it's a different universe in a lot of ways. Like cold fusion works in this universe. There's robots and weird virus. Basically in the post-apocalypse, pretty much I did like the books. Each chapter is given a summary of like some sage advice that was given by Pink's instructor, a guy named Ironbar. And he talks about various topics as though these are things that she remembers from her training days. And one of them talks about, when the underworld happened, they don't really understand in this post-apocalyptic world how it started. They really don't know. It's a complete mystery to most people. But the thing they do know is nukes happened, the zombie virus happened, a mutant virus happened, and also there was a large number of military robots that didn't go crazy, but their programming led them to do the unexpected when the soldiers they're supposed to be led by got zombified. Imagine a zombie leading a squad of 5 robots that do whatever it tells them to.
Yeah.
And they're supposed to be smart enough to creatively interpret what the human has said or what it's directed them to do. And did not work out well for most people, because zombies were kind of hostile. So you can imagine. But essentially 200 years later, these are people trying to survive. The main character and all of her associates are basically a survivor group called the Patrol, that are an amalgam of a somewhat disused military base and local police forces and first responders, firefighters, all that, who went to this airport or air station, air base now, because it used to be an airport, long story. But they gather there, and essentially they are the descendants of those people, and they're going out to try to tame the wasteland, keep things safe. But the mysterious, basically, some of their members go missing, including the guy quoted in the little blurbs before each chapter. And they're looking for him and uncover a conspiracy of sorts. It's not like super complicated. Again, this is basically it's an action movie essentially plot. So it's not. I like to compare it to a margarita glass. It's not real deep, but it's full of entertaining stuff.
Yeah.
It's fun, but it ain't deep. I'm not even going to pretend.
No. I played Wasteland, so yeah, exploded like a blood sausage for a long time was my favorite saying. I'm gonna blow you up you're gonna blow up like an exploded sausage. Yeah, he exploded like a blood sausage. The variations of that was an amazing game for its time.
Yeah. I was playing the sequel, the Wasteland 2, the more modern version. I haven't actually played the first one, weirdly enough.
Okay, there's Wasteland, Wasteland 2, Wasteland Remastered, Wasteland 3. And nobody likes 3 for some reason, but...
I don't know. Yeah, I played 2 and I really enjoyed it. So
yeah, a lot of people like 2. I don't know much about 3. I think it's a console version of Wasteland, actually. But I think in today's world it wouldn't be much of a genre because it's just maybe too simplistic. It's just go out there and basically waste the wasteland.
Yeah, and that's and that and Fallout have been staples.
I like Fallout. I played Fallout 2. 3 lost to me.
Yeah. 3, I really enjoyed 3 quite a lot. I'm one of those people that doesn't understand why Vegas is praised as highly as it is. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's good, but it's not that good. Better than 4, but I'll give them that. But I'm not sure if it's better than 3. I don't know. I mean, mechanically, sure, but story, plot, and like delivery and like general gameplay, yeah. It's hard to say. I'm sorry, we got derailed quite a bit, but
yeah, we are having a good conversation though. How did you prepare for your book? Obviously, there's a lot of inspiration there.
Yeah, well, there's that thing that when writers will occasionally talk about on social media about what are the things that you've Googled that have probably put you on
the
FBI's most watch list, and mine is as trying to figure out exactly how long radiation actually sticks around. And what's really surprising, and it shouldn't have been surprising, given that Japan, the 2 places that have been nuked, nuked actual cities that have been nuked are now fully populated and they're just fine. It's surprisingly how short that it lasts, unless you're trying to quote unquote salt the earth, which with that in mind, I decided I would go ahead and have a nod to the somewhat less fictional. One of the few nods to relatively grounded science on nuclear radiation is that the assumption was that most of the bombs that hit major cities were essentially seeded with extra radioactive material to sort of salt the earth so the cities couldn't be used again. And that's why there are some places that not literally, but pretty much glow in the dark. Because the area of Pink Apocalypse is based on my hometown. So if you're reading this and you're from where I'm from, you will instantly know pretty much in like within the first 2 chapters exactly where they are and exactly what they're doing, or exactly where they're going. Although it's not. But so basically, like the downtown of my hometown is now glows in the dark in this universe, and again, not literally, but there's zombies everywhere. But again, it's in the Midwest. So there's a lot more open space. Like one of the bigger threats in the post-apocalypse, aside from zombies and mutants and other things, but really one of their bigger threats are wild boars. Because even now in the real here and now, in a lot of states in the United States, there is a no limit on wild boars. Kill all you want, they don't care because they're such a pest and they're extremely dangerous. They get big enough, they will kill you, and you can shoot them, and they will kill you before they fall over.
Yeah, I grew up on a pig farm, and yeah, basically the method of execution, basically, because if they had to have somebody on standby, because during the process of cutting the pig's throat, it will incite violence instantly.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And if the containment breaks, you have to have somebody there with a control stick. But in reality, he's holding a shotgun to the pig's head. He's
just in case.
He's not going to worry about stunning it. He knows that the stunner will only excite it. It's like one of the robots in Wasteland. You know, I shot you. Why aren't you going down?
Yeah. The problem is the large, possibly mutant pig does not know it's dead yet.
Yes. Well, we've talked about some of your inspirations, other than Wastelands, which is, I would recommend anybody who wants to actually understand video gaming to try that game, because it is the grandfather of many modern video games. Well, it's the son. It's Fallout is its son, but there are many successes since then.
The other things that kind of inspired is the post-apocalypse genre is, of course, well and predates any of that stuff. Like, I just for preparation, I went and rewatched a few movies and read a couple books that inspired it. One of the biggest inspirations for this, in a weird way, was Escape from New York, which in many ways aged better than I thought, and many other ways aged terribly. And then also I watched A Boy and His Dog, which is a great movie, and I watched it with a friend who'd never seen it before. He's a good deal younger than me, and he was just like, "This movie is wild." I'm like, "Yeah, it is. It is really bizarre if you haven't seen it." And then, of course, so rewatching some Mad Max. There's not as much. There is some Mad Max-esque stuff in the book. Particularly with the Raiders and whatnot, and I'm probably one of the few people that thinks Mad Max 3 here in the U.S. called Beyond Thunderdome was the best movie, and not because it's even better than Furiosa because of the villains, the opposition in that movie. You actually got a sense, because what do we know about Humongous? Jack and poop. There's a tiny frame where you can catch some theoretical background from when he opens the gun case, but we don't know anything about him. Toe cutter,
we learned,
kind of.
We learned from the Furiosa novel, however, quite more about him, and I think that's his own movie right there. Yeah. That is and it's a fall of a hero, and he wipes out his past. He turns around and wipes out his past and starts again. Yeah, because he embraces the mania of the wasteland, And
then, and Furiosa's villain, and his villains were all they were a little too cartoonish for me. I mean, Auntie Entity was over the top, but she was supposed to be, because she was basically
an entertainer.
She was going on charisma, and she looked fantastic. I mean, it's the only movie I've ever seen Tina Turner in where she's amazing. I mean, just phenomenal villain. Every scene she's in, she basically steals it. It's fantastic.
She worked out for that movie. She put everything into that movie. She spent like 10 years here in Australia for that.
Wow. Because she was amazing.
Yeah.
And I hear, I forget the guy who played Iron Bar, the little guy. Apparently he had dialogue, but he was such a terrible actor. They cut out all of his voice lines, so they just let him act with his face. And he's fantastic. I love him.
Which is weird, because in later movies he was fine. But he was too raw at the time, I think.
Maybe, yeah.
Or too squeaky. I don't know. It's just I do know they had so many falling outs over changes to the script, and that is not just that movie. The entire series has had a lot of problems.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, and I know a lot of fans of it defend that there's some consistency to the writing, and I'm like, no, there's not. Here's the thing that I figure And because of the way they're structured, the only one that's actually canon, as you were, and no others that's definitely true, is the first one. The others are retellings from the point of view of people that met Max. Yes. And that's why there's no consistency.
They're all unreliable narrators. And the problem with the last one is Tom Hardy's too young.
Well, not just that. I mean, well, if we would theorize that this was a story told by Furiosa later about some encounter with Max before.
Yeah, that's what it is. She turned him into her ideal man. That would make sense. Yeah. Except for the fact that even I forgot the fact that it was meant to be unreliable narrator, and that shouldn't be something you have to be told.
Well, and I mean, yeah, I mean, you should get some, because usually at the end, at least at the end of the other ones, you got the, well, you know, like was it Screw Loose? No, it was the Wild Kid. Yeah. And then what's her name? The girl from the Paradise spot. That, yeah. You know, at the very end, they were clearly saying, "Hey, they were the
Road Warrior." Yeah, they called him the Road Warrior. They didn't even know his name.
Yeah, and they the Road Warrior, and it was great. I mean, it's one of those things that sometimes the sum of the parts and the limitations that get put on the director and creators are sometimes very helpful. Like, I mean, I think Furiosa suffers from the fact that he had almost unlimited money. Because something about the first three movies were so raw and so real because there's only so much money he could spend. I think that's also true of
junkyard cars. Yeah. He had to make every scene fast and like run out into the road, film the scene, and hopefully nobody ruins the background, which happened twice. Yeah. There's a few moments where you see dirt from other cars and you hear traffic.
and that's like Jaws was in part, it was so good. And same with Aliens, because they couldn't afford to show the creature on screen too much because it looked awful or didn't function in the case of Jaws. And that actually helped to make the movie. And I think sometimes there's but books, you don't have that problem. You have effectively in your imagination unlimited budget. But I'm going to be honest with you, and this would be the most pipe dream of the world, but if Pink Apocalypse got picked up for a movie, I would, and I had any say in it, I would insist that they try to do it like an 80s low budget movie, because that's the feel I meant for it. It's supposed to be a movie from my childhood. It's supposed to be an action adventure movie set in the 80s. There is a giant plant monster at some point. There's zombies. There's robots that should be clunky and weird looking. All of it should look like it was filmed with half the budget that the creators wanted to do. I mean, give me rubber hoses that have been very carefully like real effect physics, real special effects, plastic and plaster and foam rubber on. And I don't care if it looks a little goofy. It's supposed to. That's what I want. Not quite Planet Terror bad, but pretty close.
Yeah, Planet Terror got made and so many others didn't. That's
exactly
the scary part.
That's the other thing, is that I can laugh all I want at some really bad movies, but those, like for all the people that didn't like and understandably have some post, say refrigerator moments with Black Panther and a few other Marvel movies, they made bank and people still enjoyed them. And I think that, I mean, I'm old enough. You're probably old enough to remember like things like the old Captain America TV show, the old Spider-Man TV show, the really terrible Punisher movie. I have a very low bar of expectations with superhero movies. As long as it's decent, I'm happy, because I have watched some shit.
Yeah, so have I, and I've actually enjoyed a lot of movies. I enjoyed Morpheus. I got Morpheus. I really did. I understood it. And
I didn't think it was that bad. I mean, it wasn't great, but I mean, I've seen worse Marvel movies.
Yeah, the thing is, it made over $700 million. So
yeah,
Sony, you should have not retreated from that movie. You should have owned it.
Yeah, you made
with Spider-Man. Same with the Amazing Spider-Man 2. It made over $700 million. Own it.
Yeah,
because $700 million then is like 1.2 billion now. So.
They should just say, look, we're trying to entertain people. It's not supposed to be Shakespeare. We're not trying to do Shakespeare. It's entertainment. It's fine. Yeah. That's what I'm trying to do.
People were entertained. but
Yeah.
the loudest voices are the minority, but they're the ones who are most watched. I mean, more people watch the YouTube of Morpheus than this is what's scary. More people watch the YouTube reviews than the movie.
Well, the YouTube reviews are free.
Yeah.
You had to cough up something to watch more. Well, a friend of mine, I watched a Morpheus with a friend of mine, so I don't know how he paid for it. I didn't ask. It may have been some yar. I don't know. I just went over to his house and watched it. Like, oh, okay, let's watch Morpheus.
Okay. Yeah. Do you have a favorite writer or a particular book?
Yeah, I do. And here, okay, so like a lot like my taste in music, my taste in books over the years have changed quite a bit. I used to be deeply fond of Stephen King, but his later works are I mean, I honestly, I think where he turned me, ironically, was when I reread The Stand and realized that the ending was just like, wait, what? But I won't get into critiquing it. But on the other hand, I do like when I was a kid, I read a lot of several of the Terry Brooks novels that were, in hindsight, clearly his own sort of. And I don't mean this as a criticism, because it's not like there's a shortage of those things. Kind of his own Tolkien-esque story, and the first one, the Sword of Shannara, is kind of derivative, but it has a really interesting twist. And then the second one, which is my favorite, was the Elfstones of Shannara, which I've heard have been made into a series, and I've been told if you're a fan of it, probably shouldn't watch it. Which, given the way TV adaptations tend to go, I'm not surprised. I'll leave it alone. And I think the other thing is I've there's a couple of for some reason escaping me right now, but hang on a second. Let me just Google right quick so I can remember my names. Let's see here. Dan Abnett. He writes a lot of Warhammer 40K stuff and some fantasy. He's actually he's one of those authors who has aged well with me. I've read his stuff over the years because he's produced a lot of work. The Gaunt's Ghost series, I think, is his most famous stuff, but he's consistently good. Although ironically, I can't say that I'm like directly inspired by his work, but I've also, it's like grounding in the classics. I think we get the Conan and John Carter of Mars, all of that stuff, and Asimov. And although Asimov is another one that I don't enjoy as much as I used to, I think maybe when I was a kid, it was more easier to swallow some of the gee whiz fantasy stuff, but he's kind of dry. But I think that's just like food. Your taste in books change over time. I could be wrong about that, but that's my perception. And then you have, oh God, hold on, my brain froze again. Let's see here.
I get what you mean about Asimov and Clarke. They have fallen out of favor.
Yeah. And I think it was different back then. I think that's the other thing. Of course, I guess that's another commentary on modern literature and popular books. There is a certain amount of, and King is, again, I bring up King again because he's he coined a term that I really, really love, which is diarrhea of the keyboard. Basically, this unrestrained willingness to essentially lean on the reader's time. Which, if you were a fast reader like me, it's not a big deal. But I can sympathize with people who look like, and I love Tolkien. Don't get me wrong, and I wouldn't change a thing. But I understand to some extent when people look at this giant. I can plop down the Lord of the Rings and watch people's eyes go like saucers. I understand it. Yeah, I don't blame them for that.
The funny thing is, if you read the condensed version, you don't miss. You get the same story. Which is, I find the weirdest thing, because growing up, my grandmother had a lot of books, and a lot of them were condensed stories because they were popular. You remember Reader's Digest?
The Reader's Digest condensed novels. I read a few of those. Yes.
Yeah, and they were basically And it's amazing how many books became popular because of their digests. And actually, the digest became extremely popular and big selling. But then the company decided to get into lotteries and all sorts of things, and shouldn't have done that.
But it was, those were actually really, really fascinating. I can imagine the editors / authors who were doing that. I can only imagine what that work had to be like to try and condense down a classic novel into a digestible bite, not mess it up, you know?
Yeah, you had to produce, what was it? It had to be 75,000 words or less. And some of the novels you couldn't do that with. But Lord of the Rings, it's amazing. It's an amazing version of the story because it almost cuts out nothing.
That's one of those things. I feel like the good example, another similar to that, is The Stand. I've read the Stand and the unabridged version, and I'm telling you, what they took out of the Stand was completely justified. But I understand why the author wrote it. You know.
Yeah, I think people say that about me too. That I'm a bit verbose, which is the correct term for verbal diarrhea. So. Yep. Yeah. Or I describe the wrong things, and I'm saying, well, I'm not. What are the right things to describe? You know, I describe people and some of the things and the way they dress because that's part of, style and character. You know, I think people these days, it's like the Inseki novels, like we said before about Inseki. They're practically just scripts.
Yeah, and to some extent they are. Sometimes they have some interesting details or just ideas that get executed. Like one that I'm reading right now is called Cooking with Wild Game. Not a whole lot goes on, but it's basically about cooking with unfamiliar materials, and it's, like I said, it's just relaxing because it's like watching I understand why people watch telenovelas or soap operas. You know what's going on. It's not real complicated, but but on the other hand, I'm
soothing noise than entertainment. It's soothing noise.
Yeah, kind of. And the other thing, although on the flip side, though, for writers who are very verbose, I think there are a lot of people who really enjoy really deep, chewy novels, to put it that way. Like on the flip side, like I know some authors that do both. Like Glenn Cook, one of my favorite authors of all time. I actually had the honor of meeting him in person and having him sign my favorite book. I bought a copy from his booth at a convention, and met his wife as well, and they were both lovely. He signed my book, and it was the one he's most famous for, I think, is the Black Company series. But the one that I wanted him to sign was Tower of Fear.
Company.
Yeah, but if I would recommend anyone to get introduced to his work, it has to be the Tower of Fear. It is it's one novel story, self-contained, and it is fantastic. I love it. I've read it 4 times, which for me is a lot. Because I read very fast, but I retain most of it. So I'll usually reread something maybe once, maybe twice. Reading it many times is unusual for me. Lord of the Rings is the only other thing I've read more than 3 times. And I really love it. But on the flip side, he's got some other novels that are really, really dense. And I don't like them as much, but I get why people do. It's one of those things with Lord of the Rings. I wouldn't change it, but I can understand why an abridged version would appeal to people. I get it, because you like you said earlier, there is no way you can please everyone, and you shouldn't try, because you're just not going to. Like, I'm not going to please anybody that wants literary greatness or deep characters, except, well, not in Pink Apocalypse. Maybe depending on how you look at it in what I'm working on now. Because it started as an adventure story, but as the characters sometimes run off with you, and this is actually more of a character study and a story about
personalities,
personality and loss. Really, the large part of it is just about but I didn't even intend for it to do that, but I was basically trying to the whole November writing challenge. I didn't finish it in time, but I just let it go where it wanted to go, and it actually developed quite nicely. But I still haven't got it finished yet. That was from
the problem with me and those November challenges in write a novel in 1 month is I barely get a chapter in a month sometimes.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
I'm not fast, and the faster I write, the dirtier I get. So, and then it's too messy as well, and so, you know, enough about me. What about you? What research do you do? Because we mentioned before you went into Google stuff. Yeah, we all have. Anybody who's a writer. Let's see. The meme is you know, how to dispose of a body, how long does a body take to decay, and what flavors of coffee are on special this month? And I go, yes,
yeah, pretty much. Well, it depends on the specifics. Like I had to find out, like I had to do, because I remember when cold fusion was a thing when I was younger, when people thought that would work. So I decided just on a whim that was going to work, because I wanted, you know, because normally in like most post-apocalypse, they just assume these little nuclear reactors run forever, and then they explode with radiation everywhere. I was like, no, I don't want that. I want to do something different. So I thought, oh yeah, there was that whole cold fusion thing. What if in this universe it worked? Because this is, again, it's an action adventure movie. I don't expect it to conform to reality too much, not too far in time. So yeah, the robots have little self-repair nanites, but I don't want to go into a huge whole nanite cloud thing, because I really don't think. I think it's kind of become a magic excuse for things. It's like, no, it should be sensible. Like a lot of things when people actually use it, like essentially, it's an internal 3D printer for parts and things like that. You know, it's not a magical fix things where things just regenerate. It doesn't work that way. You know.
No, I think that's where the superhero genre and science fantasy and has really corrupted the mind of the reader to expect a certain story. And that is, man, if I was a superhero, why would I punch anybody and they live? I mean, you realize now that most people may have actually heard that one punch can kill.
Yeah, it
Could you imagine?
It's unlikely, but it can.
Yeah, it's more like 1 in 2,000, or it's actually a lot higher than most people realize. It's just, but you imagine if I was a so-called superhero, and if I could lift up a car and I punched you, you wouldn't have a face. You wouldn't have a bone structure.
You'd have to learn restraint quite a lot, and I do want to do a superhero book at some point, but
But one thing I hate about the superhero genre is power scaling.
Oh yeah, that's my one.
I'm the Hulk. I punch a wall. I go straight through it. Then I punch a guy, and he's only knocked over. That's no.
It's not scaling too. What really bothers me is that this, and it's especially bad in some anime where there's this who's tougher than whom. It's like that does not like. Being powerful doesn't make you interesting. What's interesting about the Hulk is not the fact that he's ridiculously powerful. What's interesting about the Hulk is that he doesn't want to be the Hulk.
His personal struggles were the greatest Hulk stories, not the wham bam, I throw a tank at you, man.
Yeah. Now, on the flip side of that, on the other hand, I personally am of the opinion that authors that think Superman is boring aren't very imaginative, because they can't figure out a character who doesn't have deep flaws. I'm like, deep flaws don't necessarily make a great character. Superman is an interesting character for a lot of reasons. He's just not this sort of interesting character in that way. It's like that's the other thing where you have people like, oh, you have to have great flaws for your character. Really?
Yeah, really? Because he was confined by his morality, not by his flaws.
Yeah.
He chose to take the moral path, and his moral struggles made for some excellent stories, which was why he became the third highest selling character of all time in the 90s.
Yeah, and it's just the other thing is to some extent because he was nearly invulnerable. There was some people are like, well, that doesn't have any tension. I was like, no, he's not the one who's in danger. That's always the point. And again, a lot of other things, people are like, well, you know, the hero's going to win. It's like it's not the fact that
it's every book.
It's like it's not. We watch almost every movie. We know 99% of the time the good guys are going to win. It's not the destination, it's the journey, it's the execution. We know, like when you read most novels, unless you've been warned in advance it's a tragedy, the protagonist is probably going to be okay. I mean, even some really dark stuff. It's still the protagonist is usually there because they're the ones you're following them along. And if they die at the end, okay, as long as it's a satisfying end, it's fine.
And I think that's something that should be, which leads to the next question: advice for a new writer. And that we've pretty much given a lot of advice on writing. But is there any one specific thing you'd like to say? Hey, you right now, you have a story to tell.
The first thing I would say is whatever other hobbies you have, either cut back some time from it or drop a hobby you don't like that much. Like I dropped Warhammer 40K for other hobbies a long time ago because of my wallet, also the time. I love it, but I can't afford to do. I don't have the money for that anymore. But freeing up time from, like I stopped doing MMOs in part because I wanted more time for writing. The main thing is just get started. If you're like, I don't know how to do this, I don't know what I'm doing, do it. You will learn by doing. And you will write some stuff that you will look back on and go, oh God, this sucks. That's okay. Every person who ever cooked has burned something. Every person who's ever baked has gotten stuff that just is literally inedible.
Every driver's rear-ended somebody
stuff up than you will by succeeding. When somebody reads your stuff and go, God, and they just can't get through it, or they think it's awful or whatever, trust me, it will hurt.
90%.
Keeping in mind though, you cannot please everybody, like we said earlier. But just do it, because my mistake. If I had a time machine, I would do two things. I would go back to myself and say, start writing now. And the other is get yourself checked for sleep apnea. But the writing in regards to writing, that was the thing, is I just needed to start doing it, get in the habit. It's like getting in the habit of exercising or riding a bike. Just do it. And even if it's terrible, if you know it's awful, you don't have to show it to anyone. You don't have to share your failures. That's the nice thing about writing. Once the learning process may be painful, but you don't have to share that if you don't want to. If you write I've written some terrible stuff just for fun. Like, I'll give you an example. There is a certain criticism of male authors about overdoing the female anatomy and things like that. I one time, just as an exercise in silliness, went ahead and did that on purpose.
Yeah.
And I have shown it to no one. But
it was probably the funniest thing you've written, but it's not the funniest thing you'll share.
Exactly. There were the other things. If you get a good idea, go ahead and start writing it. You'll know by the time you're a couple thousand words into it if you want to complete it. And if you don't, you have practiced your craft. Now, I have about a dozen ideas that will probably never see completion because they're not that good. But I put a couple anywhere from 2,000 to 8,000 words into it to be sure. But that wasn't wasted time. That was practice. Artists, my wife is an artist. She practices all the time. She's not going to show half the shit she sketches because she doesn't like it. That's fine. But it was practice. Same thing for writers. Just do it. And if you write crap, toss it away. Start on something else. Even if it's the same thing, just start the execution over. I've rewritten 2 of the chapters in this book because I got about halfway through and went, this stinks. Toss it on and did it again. I still had the same concept, but I practice. And that's the main advice I would give. Just start doing it now, especially if you're young. Trust me, you do not have anywhere near as much time as you think you do. It will run away from you in a hurry. Life will do that. I don't even talk about how much time I've lost, but it's fine. I'm coping with it. But if I had a time machine, like I said, go back, try it again. Just start doing it. Even if it's terrible, you don't have to show it to anyone. And trust me, you'll probably have a good idea if it's bad.
Now, how do you cope with stress?
Oh, God. Honestly, my favorite way of dealing with stress is to go onto a video game and blow stuff up. Like Fallout 4 has lots of flaws. It's a great stress reliever. Blow shit up. It's great. or just go outside. That's the other thing I got to tell you. Writing, and I also the work I do. I work at as a customer service, so I spend a lot of time at a desk, either mine or the company's. Going for a walk will release a lot of stress because, and also sometimes you can formulate ideas. And now these days with smartphones, if you need to, if you got an idea and you need to record it, good news, you probably have something in your pocket, or at least jot it down so you don't forget. At least that.
Yeah, you can, and you can always call your mom, tell her to hang up and leave. You can always call a voice service message. Call yourself a voice message. You used to be able to do that, actually, do a voice message. But there's a recorder. Most phones have recorder, although lately they're only shorts. But you've got a bunch of shorts on your phone. I remember in the 90s, personal dictaphones.
Oh yeah. They're at this point in this day and age, there's almost no way around it. If you don't have if you're really broke, I know people that write on their cell phones because they don't have a computer. I know I've talked to some people that that's all they had, and and almost everyone has a cell phone these days. But I don't want to, not to quote Blizzard, but hey, you got a smartphone, don't you? But
if you haven't got a computer, you can actually go to most tech centers. Most Samsung has one, Apple has one. I forget who else has one, but you can rent a tablet cheaper than a smartphone.
There are some alternative options, but I mean, if you really want to write, even if you're just writing it by hand, at least get your ideas down. And if I'm just saying,
for the cost of a notebook these days, a tablet
at least it's a way to save an idea, so that the down the road when you get something you can do some writing on, you've got it. So but I can't overemphasize anyone that wants to write, just get started. No, I don't care how terrible you think you're going to be. Again, just like cooking, you're gonna bleep it up the first time. It's fine,
I forget what. Catcher in the Rye, wasn't it written in one of those little flip notebooks?
That wouldn't surprise me. I mean, it felt like a stream of consciousness by someone who was either really depressed or kind of drunk, maybe both.
Yeah, but
I only read it once.
That is not how you deal with stress. I recommend walking.
Well, the walking, that's the biggest thing, is walking, or find
somebody who's destroyed their liver. I say, I do not recommend alcohol.
No, alcohol's a bad idea. That's not. Well, I mean, okay, let me rephrase that. Everybody's different, but I can't recommend it. I mean, because I drink very rarely, so when I do, it's primarily to relax. But I'm already in an environment where I can just relax at home, watch a movie, and just chill out. I'm already on the way to relax. I don't start that to relax.
But I think it's the pressure to have the second one. As long as you can not have the second one, I think that's fine. Now, you've mentioned Warhammer. That is something I was into, RPGs and Warhammer and a lot of stuff. I still write RPG stuff on my primary Patreon, although popularity is declining for RPGs, I think, or at least I think even D&D is losing its, but a lot of the, on the edge, sci-fi stuff, I think people are, I don't know, losing their imagination or just not wanting to use it. I don't buy into this that we don't have enough time. No. We have way too much time on our hands. We are wasting half our lives standing in line for stuff.
I was about to say, I think there's two things that may have contributed to the decline of the pen and paper RPG, to some extent D&D maybe in particular. And I'm not talking about recent trends, but I think in general, one of the things that the video games are now able to some extent feel the niche that D&D used to with social gaming. Because for me, at least, a lot of my friends, the D&D and other gaming around the tabletop was a social experience. You can now get a lot of that through
social media
because you can build friendships or even have your friends real life friends together on a group game and play it together in that same social experience where the game itself is the DM essentially. It's a little more predictable. It's not the same. I think it's a different experience, but I think that there's a niche that's filled by the gaming with your friends that is now done very much online instead of in person.
It's now done by RuneQuest, WoW. I mean, WoW was the original social media. A chat box was, RuneQuest with chat box.
Oh yeah,
that you just go, wow, I'm not going to play this game, but look at this chat box.
Yeah, and there were some people who, like, I remember when I was in when we got our first computer back when my wife went to college, we actually got EverQuest and we started playing it, and this was really early, like before the first expansion, all that stuff way back. And there was a certain like some of the starting areas, people would just have conversations just about stuff. And then, of course, if you played World of Warcraft, for those who played on the Horde side, there is the infamous Barons chat, where it was basically like just, shit posting all the time. It was more like social media is now. Yeah.
But people actually found that you could post images by using HTML, and WoW really exploded with that, originally, because basically, you can imagine what teenage boys were sharing.
Oh yes, I know exactly what they, because I'm only 50 on the outside. I'll tell you that.
That's it. But I mean, when you're not writing, you still. I mean, there are still stuff to do. I mean, is there any of your old hobbies you still keep going?
Yeah, I still play video games a little bit, and I every once in a while I'm able to squeeze in some tabletop. I can't afford to do Warhammer anymore.
No, that's the thing. I'm actually developing, and it's quite not as easy as it sounds. Developing, well, I'm using at the moment an RPG engine, tabletop. Just developing my world by doing RPG stuff. It's my world building. That's what my first Patreon's about. It's all my world building. But I've been asked several times, "Oh, can you do a war game? Can you do a war game?" And I'm actually looking at it right now to do a war game, but in a way that I'm trying to do a pen and paper war game that doesn't involve major expense.
Yeah. The way that, because I remember back when I played this, way back when I got into RPGs, kind of the second time, I played a lot of Champions, and one of the things Steve Jackson Games put out the Cardboard Heroes, and BattleTech originally came with cardboard cutouts for your
I remember the original BattleTech, Battle Mech. Actually, I think it was. Wasn't it renamed? It was
Battle Droids initially, but it got renamed because lawsuit. And then I also played Mechton quite a bit. We used the cheap plastic model kits for those to play that, and that was quite fun.
Yeah, but I'm just looking today at a lot of youth, and I'm seeing they'll stand for an hour lining up for fast food, and yet they can't sit down for 5 minutes and read a book. It's attitude, not it's not Adderall, it's attitude. It's the attitude of the parents who think, "Oh, he's too hyperactive for me. I'm scared. I've got to give him Adderall." No, give him a book.
Or basically, I think there's a bit of physical hobbies. I mean, honestly, when I was a kid and I was too hyperactive, my parents just said, go outside and play, and they figured. I know it's one of those things that I can see parents these days looking. Sometimes you feel like they're looking on with horror, like, "You what now?" I'm like, "Yeah, we used to listen. My parents would send me outside and not expect to see me for 6 hours, and they were fine with that, or 4 hours if it was lunchtime, whatever, And that,
my father would say, my father would get me to dig a new trench. You were lucky. Because we get flooded all the time. Got to keep water out of the pigs. trenches always get refilled by mud and sludge.
Oh man!
But eventually, you run out of things to do. So I got into pen and paper games, and I think that's where it really sparked my creativity. I know a lot of writers that I've met along the way, and I've actually been to a few conventions. It's really a lot of people start.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thought. I've had that thought before, where that I will say, like, running a game for other people is actually very educational as a writer to some extent, because you become used to being the eyes and ears of several people at once. You're basically, you can put the map down and you can put the miniatures down, but to some extent, when they say what's in the room, you have to describe it to them, and getting in the habit of that and getting the practice of that is not a bad way of learning how to describe things. So it's almost like you could, hypothetically, if you were making a writer's boot camp, one of the first things I'd have them do is play D&D and then have them run a game and because I ran into that when I was very young. I first ran into a friend of mine who was trying to run a game, and he would just put down the book and show the map. I said, no, don't do that. Tell them what they see. It's much more interesting if their imagination fills in what's in the room. Where it's sometimes when you don't see, like, one of my favorite games of all time is pen and paper games. It's called Feng Shui. It's a fantastic game that's supposed to emulate the feeling of Hong Kong action movies. And one of the things that they instructed that you can't do as a writer, but it's very instructive to kind of get an idea of what people expect when they hear certain words, is they tell you don't use maps. You describe an area in general. Like, for instance, one of the very first adventures, they say, hey, you have a big fight at a construction site. So you just tell the players, hey, you're at a construction site. It's, there's a building that's got the girders and stuff in progress. And then if somebody asks, hey, is there X or Y? If it could logically be in a construction site, you should always answer yes. Like if someone says, hey, we're in a bar fight, I want to pick up the guy, throw him on the bar, and slide him into a bunch of glasses. Is there a bunch of glasses and stuff on the bar? The answer should, if at all possible, be yes. Because it helps you get an idea of what people expect when they're in a certain, like if someone is reading about a construction site, if you've ever done this kind of thing, you can take it from the reader's point of view and go, okay, this is what I would expect to see if I were reading this. So this shit should be here. You should, to some extent. I mean, there's this trend of wanting, like, give a twist on, or deliver something unexpected to the reader. Sure, but first, live up to their expectations in a general sense, so they don't feel alienated from the world and the plot and the story. If you're trying to deliver too much of a twist or something, subvert their expectations. That's the word I'm looking for. Subverting the audience's expectations is fine up to a point. If it's a mystery genre, sure. And even then, there's only certain conventions you should do this in. But especially an action adventure, don't do that. I mean, there are some twists you can put in, but there's certain things that you shouldn't do. You shouldn't, you basically shouldn't try to make the audience confused, because they have certain expectations, and those are boundaries that you shouldn't feel restrained by. They're more like guidelines of, hey, these are the things, like, we're in space, so they expect, even if it's physics, science, because of the way the media works and the way, especially with movies, they expect to hear shit, even if they shouldn't. And like even those somewhat realistic shows like The Expanse went ahead and gave us sound to when appropriate for battle scenes and whatnot, because we understood that the characters would hear it through the hull of the ship. Okay, another stuff like that, because you want to give them something to hear, because if it's literally the way it's supposed to be, or if you're trying to subvert their expectations, you may actually disconnect them from the narrative, and they're no longer invested because they're confused and trying to figure out what the bleep is going on. So you really do want to kind of set those expectations a bit. And I think GMing is a good way to learn that. Maybe. I don't know. That's my thought. Sorry, I went on for a bit, but that's me.
Well, we both guilty of that. But I think, one of the purposes behind interviewing people is inspiration, and not just for you, for me, for the audience. I mean, getting to know inspiration, getting to know the creative process is something, I pretty much, I envisage the future of the written word, to be the digital word. I think digital books are going to be more and more common. I think not just because of the cost of printing or any environmental saving they think they're engaged in, but I think it's going to be people are going to say, well, growing up, books were precious to me, so I'm only going to have because a lot of people throughout their life are going to have a lot of books, but they're only going to keep a few. Whereas with digital books, this gives them that that feeling they're not wasting their time. I see digital books going to a few bucks and staying for a few bucks. Under $5, which is hard for some people because the cost of editing, the cost of covers. But I think we're going to see a lot more digital books, a lot more self-publishing. And I think we're going to see a lot shorter stories, unfortunately. But I think stories always should be as long as they need to be.
Exactly.
Like they should never be without description. I love description. I grew up on I grew up on a lot of long-winded books, and I don't regret it.
Yeah, I mean, depending on your genre, that's really appropriate. Like for what I'm writing, most of the time I'm writing action and adventure. So being snappy and having stuff fairly brief is important because you want a sense of pace. But on the other hand, I've got another book that will probably be the longest thing I will ever write. That is much more of a travel log and character study, and it's a fantasy novel, and it will probably be long as all get out. I mean, I expect it to be 3 times the size of Pink Apocalypse because it needs to be. Pink Apocalypse, on the other hand, cuts off I think some people may feel that I haven't had anybody complain about it, but I could understand if someone said, well, that's where it ends. Like, yeah, that's because that was the logical place for it to stop before the next book, because the main arc of what was going on was I had one person who read it. It was like, whatever happened to the person they were looking for? That's in the epilogue. They actually forgot to read it, but they could understand. But the essentially the one of the characters that they're looking for, they never find. And spoilers, but that's a lot. There's a lot of things they're looking for, so I could be meaning any of them. And the other thing is that I like, and this is just me, is that it, to a large extent, you should write for yourself. I mean, I write the things that I want to read. That's it. I don't write. I mean, not that I don't write with anyone else in mind, but I want people who are like me to like this book. And if other people like this book, that's okay. And if they don't like it, to sort of paraphrase the most famous person who said this phrase, Brie Larson, it wasn't made for you. And that's okay, because you can't make it for everyone. And if someone doesn't like it because it doesn't feel like it's their style, just go, okay, well, thank you for your feedback. You probably weren't the person I meant it for, but I'm glad that you read it. I mean, at least you could say, hey, you read it. That I appreciate that. Thank you for your time, because you invested some of your limited time on this earth reading what I wrote. Thumbs up to you. I appreciate that, even if you hated it.
That's weird.
I didn't do it.
Sorry, I just got flooded with spam. It normally doesn't happen. Normally gets filtered out very quickly. Sorry. During the StreamYard. Did you? Well, what happened? Yeah.
I don't know.
I got flooded with spam and StreamYard just blinked. Sorry about that.
That's okay. It happens. I mean, like I said, I was used to Google Hangouts, which occasionally just sort of died. Yeah. It was great especially towards the end when they finally got things fine-tuned. But that's just the way Google does things. They sometimes tend not to sustain perfectly good programs for no good reason.
Yeah. But I think what happened with Google Hangouts is the expense was greater than the value.
Well, they've replaced it with something else, haven't they?
Yeah, because it was originally intended as a corporate product. They didn't, and they were just testing it. They weren't really. It was a beta test that they forgot to unbeta. They just left it up. and you can understand from Google's point of view that they were only chasing the corporate, the Zoom crowd.
Yeah.
They weren't that. They don't like free to play.
Well, no, I mean, yeah, kind of. Yeah, it was nice while it lasted, I guess. But
it was nice while it lasted. And
StreamYard seems good. I haven't used it from the other side, but I haven't had a bad. This experience on this side has been fine.
Well, that's what I mean. Don't forget, Google, particularly YouTube, were licensing for I think $1,000 a month or something their API, and they weren't getting any takers, and they suddenly realized that all you had to do was just do Hangouts and boom.
Yeah.
But StreamYard, yeah, definitely. StreamYard and many others like it. They're all pretty much point and click, very intuitive. I'm not commissioned or paid for or sponsored by, so. And neither was this ad. YouTube, this interview does come across as an ad. That's exactly what an interview is, and it's an ad. But I'm not. Carpenter isn't paying me to do this, and I'm not paying him to be here. So YouTube is very sensitive about that because there's been a lot of recent scandals where people have been told to pay upwards of $100, $200, $3,000 in one case. Wow. To do this, and so YouTube, this is because I guess they want a piece. They're trying to work out how to get a piece of pie out of everything, and from their point of view, I can understand it. But from my point of view, if I'm paying for StreamYard, right, that means StreamYard's paying YouTube for their API. That should be it,
Yeah.
They're doing their advertising, and they're making way more than they give. So they're making billions of dollars from advertising. But anyway, enough of that. It's destructive to the creative process, but it's also necessary in that there is a hardware and technical side of it. Same with writing. There's a hardware and technical side of writing that takes not just time but investment.
Definitely.
Definitely.
And I guess, and just YouTube is a strange place, and it's nice that it does let us have conversations like this and broadcast it to the world. But their interest, I suppose, is in the ads. Somewhere there's ad breaks, or will be anyway.
I don't know yet. I think what happens is you qualify in stages. You have to prove yourself to be ad worthy and ad friendly, and that's why they have minimum users and minimum user counts and minimum subscriptions and minimum airtime. I don't think I'll get that for a while, but people are interested in writers and what they have to say. A lot of people are fascinated by writers. I'm doing this from my point of view. It's not just advertising my own book or advertising other people's books, but also part of the inspiration process and part of the creative process.
Yeah.
And it's fun. It's fun to interview people. It's fun to meet somebody and go, wow, somebody played this game. I played that too.
And that's another thing is if I've got any audience, like pre-existing audience for this kind of thing, it's definitely the people that are fans of the post-apocalypse genre and the games around that. Because again, it's about as deep as most games and movies in this genre are. Just to say, it's like a margarita glass. It's not very deep, but it's full of fun, and that's it. I don't pretend it's anything else, and that's fine because not everything. It's like not only is it impossible for everything to be Shakespeare, not everything should be, because that's too much in life. I mean, because you want
variety.
You want variety, and you also want to have a break from things that make you think too hard. Not that there's not things to think about, because there are hints and the implications of, you could read a lot into like the implications of genetic engineering and robots and nuclear weapons and power and a bunch of other things into this. Those are all staples of the genre, where there's a question of, what hath God wrought, or what hath man wrought. Those are beneath the surface. Those are at the bottom of the margarita glass. It's fine.
Yeah, I think with any genre, it's always people expect too far and then a resolution. But if you look at it from a logical point of view, let's just take Terminator. Fine, you might have got one.
Yeah.
Look at the difficulty it took down. Look at the difficulty it took to take down one.
Yeah.
Then you think, how the hell did they take down so many? And so you think, oh yeah. But then you look at it logically and you go, no, you can't beat a chess computer. Come on.
Well, I think the other thing, on that note, by the way, as far as Terminator material goes, if anyone hasn't seen the Sarah Connor Chronicles, I highly recommend them. They're really good, much better than the later movies. It's actually I'll give you an example in science fiction in particular, where like a lot of people are fans of Battlestar Galactica, the newer one. I really didn't like it because basically I hated everybody. After a while, they were all terrible, and and I understand they had to have to have drama and tension. They had these characters had to disagree, but they were all just jerks. Sarah Connor Chronicles. One of the nice things about it was a really good, I think, a lesson in writing. We've got people that all have differing agendas and are very stern about it, but they're not unlikable. You can all go to each character and go, okay, well, if they're right, they're doing the right thing and they're an honorable person to some extent. But on the flip side, if they're wrong about that and the other character is right, then basically the characters, none of them feel like they're being confrontational because they're jerks. On the good guy side, the Terminator is always evil, of course, but on the good guy side, there's some genuine conflict in the team, so to speak, and you can sympathize with their perspective. It's very well written, so that nobody's a jerk. Because that was my big complaint about Battlestar Galactica, because I actually, after a while, started to hate everybody. I was just waiting for them all to die.
People didn't really have a gender in Battlestar Galactica. They just they had an ego. Let's face it. All they wanted to be was the best at killing.
Yeah, and the meta arc on that too was a lot like Lost. I don't think there was never a plan. I don't think they had any good idea what they were doing.
I think they had no intention of finishing the series on Earth. I think originally, as they planned it, it was going to be a doomed adventure.
Yeah, probably.
And but then they got picked up for 2 more seasons, and I thought, no, wait, we can't do that. And then they started getting told they can't do the storylines they wanted without specifically hinting. And then I think they also didn't want to have the problem of following the original Larson layout, is that we got saved by an outside force that came along and gave us the weapon to defeat the Cylons.
Yeah.
Which basically, they're toasters, man. Just point a microwave at them and crank up the energy.
And the other thing was that trying to make the Cylons sympathetic was just, I think
idiotic.
It was, I don't know. Yeah, it's kind of sad that the original series, as campy as it was still in some ways better written, just because at least the characters were consistent.
Anybody who likes Battlestar Galactica, I recommend you read the last 5 books, or anybody who's seen the Galactica series, go back and read the original last 5 books by Larson. It may not be the satisfying ending you want, but if you think about it, it's the way it should have ended. That somebody came along and said, look, this race, the Cylon race, the lizard people, they created this menace. We defeated it. We're defeating it. We're it's not just you guys who suffered. All these people suffered, and
yeah.
I just think it was. I think Larson wrote himself into a corner, and so he had to rush the alien out, and that's why they canceled the series, because that's not what Hollywood wanted.
Yeah, probably so. But it's
I hate when
things.
people do that, though. I hate when one person who has all the money says, no, that's not what I want, and everybody else, and damn to the audience, because as far as I'm concerned, entertainment still should be driven by the audience, even if we're writing for ourselves.
Yeah, because you want to make something, because if you want other people to read it, it needs to be palatable, and especially if you're asking for their money, you should, because you don't want to deliberately try to turn your audience off. That's where you set the reasonable expectation of, hey, like on the back cover of Pink Apocalypse, it is written like you're getting an announcement from an old 80s trailer. It's a little over the top. It's kind of campy. That's my warning to anyone saying, hey, here's what you're in for. So so I set the reasonable expectation. You're not gonna get the deepest thing in the world. You're also not. If you put a phrase on the back of that that says "badass bullet babes," you are not telling people this is Shakespeare, and that's entirely intentional. I had someone react to that, going, "Is he serious?" I'm like, "No, obviously not."
Yeah, it's like I put a warning on mine. Don't. This is not what This is not your. This is not your grandfather. This is not. This is not. This is not for the sensitive. The trigger warning.
I paraphrased The Wizard of Oz with zombies and robots and bandits. Oh my! Come on now. But on the flip side, you don't want to betray that expectation, because you don't want someone to look at that, read that, and go, "Oh, okay, we're in for a campy adventure." Because like the 80s movies, it's over the top, but only when you're viewing it from the outside. The characters take it in completely straight. To them, this is serious business. Even when you have robots and zombies and raiders, oh my, and some really ludicrous stuff happens. But for the characters, this is their lives. This is real to them. If I were going to write a comedy, and I probably will at some point, that would be different. But the audience should go, okay, this is going to be slightly weird and over the top. I'm in, and then once you've set that expectation, don't betray it. I guess that's the thing. You write for your audience, but you should basically tell the potential audience, hey, this is what you're in for. So and then keep that expectation. Say, hey, you're in for a superhero romp. Don't try to make it a political commentary, because that's not why they came. They saw a superhero movie and said, hey, and I don't care what your politics are, which I don't give a shit. If it's a superhero movie, the trailers make it look like action adventure, you should deliver action adventure. That's all I'm asking. If it's Sophie's Choice and you do the trailers like that, fine. It better be drama. It better be sad, because that's what you told me it was going to be. That's why on the cover of Pink Apocalypse, there's some nods to old comics, and there's a girl with fairly substantial boobs and a gun. I'm just telling you what you're in for.
And that, I think, is the best book trailer ever. This is what you're in for.
Exactly. This is what
that's why a
good covers should tell the audience what you're in for.
Adventure.
I've seen a lot of really abstract covers. I'm like, don't do that. Tell your audience what they're in for.
That's amazing. And thank you for coming.
Hey.
And the links are in the description below, not just for my book, but for Carpenter's. And it is book 1 of a series. So,
yep.
Thank you for an amazing conversation. And I hope you do well with your book.
I appreciate that, sir. Thank you for your time. And, also, I guess for anyone that watches the stream, I'll let you in on a secret. Check my link on Christmas. You may have a surprise. Just saying.
All right. With that,
ho, ho.
Ho, 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 and goodbye.
Goodbye.